One. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Welsh Republic podcast, episode 72 today. And I am here with my guest, Logan Fleckenstein. How are you doing today, Logan?
Dude, I am just ecstatic to be here. I'm just very honored and humbled to
Fair
be here,
enough.
man.
You're welcome. What have you been up to today? Anything much?
Oh man, today actually was a weird day. I found out so I've been just this past couple months have been just a very transformational and weird time of my life, to be honest. And that's was also within like the weird transformation of like COVID times, which was also right after a weird transformation of like 5 years. So I've just been through a weird heck of a roller coaster. But like today, my new job that I have had for like less than a month, it'll be, I think the fourth will be 1 month in this new job. I work at a dog park. So I essentially just care for dogs and make
Oh,
sure
that's
they
awesome. What
uh,
type of dogs do you care for? Like, how many type of dogs are there different?
all types, all sizes. Normally the maximum amount we'll try to have is like 30-ish. That's like the maximum. That's like that we allow for a day. And most of the time it's just people kind of dropping off their dogs, and we watch them just during the day, and then most of the time they're working or whatever, and so we just watch them during the day. Some people drop them off later in the day, some people pick them up earlier in the day, but typically yeah, it's just watch people's dogs during the day and just make sure they don't get in have fun, and they're just being dogs. Let them, exert some energy and run around, and you get to let them be like very much more like just free and stuff than you would might ordinarily, your own dog at your house. You don't let your dog go all stir crazy, but when you're at work, that's kind of part of it. You're walking around the field at the very least, making sure they're all walking around and pooping and everything else they need to do. So yeah, I mean it's
Is
I just
How long have
I'm
you
sorry.
been working at this dog park place for?
Oh, I started October 4th, I think, or so, was like my first day or first or something like that. So I just started this job. I had previously, right before, was working at the produce section of a like grocery store, like a local grocery store chain, um, like very very local to this area. Um, and it was, I mean, the job itself was okay, but like to be honest, I had like a really, especially I had some management that was just not the best of management, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah, management, especially, were they good to autistic people there or not really?
well, here's the funny thing. Literally in my section, the produce section, I had one other autistic dude working there, and I could tell like they definitely did not know how to treat mental of any sort, let alone autism. Like, dude, the assistant manager of the produce section there, he had anger management issues, large partially because, and he admitted this, in part because of the produce manager himself, which was like this very old school militant. Like he was doing this, I think he said like for like 25 or 30 years or some crazy stuff like that, like a couple or so decades of being the produce manager of this place. It was just like, so he had just a very like, just pop, 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 sort of aggressive, just militant sort of stance, which obviously if for us, militant is not the best approach. At least, especially for me, at least especially of how I've been. Militant is not the best approach.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
So, with that, what is your favorite type of dog, Logan, to walk?
Um, well, I have my own dog. Which I don't know. She's somewhere around here. Maybe she'll show up. But she's like this. So I had this. So before. Okay. So I lived in China for a year and taught English, which is a whole other crazy part of my life story we can get into, which obviously for an autistic person is pretty weird to do. But like during that time, like within the first month of me living in China, I ended up rescuing a stray dog. Like she was just literally just a stray there in the streets, and I just rescued her. She was just like, I'm like, oh, my dog. And I named her Noelle because I adopted her 2 days before Christmas. And like, yeah, she's probably my favorite dog to walk, obviously. Like, she's just pretty much my favorite. Like, it's like her and one other cat that I've had. They're like my. Then again, I kind of think maybe if reincarnation is a thing, it's probably her and that cat's body somehow, knowing how stuff is. But anyways, point being, like this dog is my favorite dog to walk. She's like a miniature, like Chinese German Shepherd, essentially. Like think like a German Shepherd, but like more of a medium-sized dog. Actually, you check out my YouTube channel, you'll see a lot of videos of her.
I have seen some of your videos. Your dogs are very,
Yeah,
very cute, and they're very
yeah,
adorable.
right. And that like a lot of those, like especially when you see a bunch of those dogs, that's my job. That's been my work. In fact, I just got one like a video earlier today that like hit like 2,000 views, which has been pretty good for me. Like it's a short, man, mind you. These are not like it's not like me like pontificating upon long stuff, which I kind of do like doing that sort of stuff. I wouldn't mind getting back into that sort of stuff and talking about things. I just haven't really. I've just been going through a lot of stuff, so it's just been easier. Just be like, oh, I'm just gonna. I don't know. A while ago, I just kind of came up with the idea, like, no, I'm just gonna videotape. Just put some let people watch my dogs play because that's part of my life. So I've been doing that for a while, and it's slowly, especially by now, like it's been really kind of catching up. Especially doing it as like the short videos. Some short videos will have barely any views, and then you'll get one that'll like reach like my highest one is like 3K views. It's just a
Wow, that's pretty
squirrel.
impressive for a dog video. Have you ever thought
I
about starting
know.
your own? Have you ever thought about, making like dog vlogging a full-time thing, mostly, or like
I
a big
mean,
thing on your channel? You should go for it,
I
especially
mean,
if you're able to get 3,000 views.
right? I mean, it's definitely. I was definitely. This is something I've kind of jumped into, but like definitely. I mean, what works, what works. It's not. I feel like at the end of the day, you just kind of, when it comes to life and all this sort of stuff, you can do all the sort of planning you want, but ultimately it's more about just you're kind of just surfing these waves. You just kind of find what works and you're making it work. You know what I mean? And like that's just kind of what I've been doing with this. So I mean, yeah, I guess that's kind of essentially kind of when I'm sort of doing. I mean, I don't really do any commentary ever on the videos or anything like that. I just let the dogs do their thing. But I mean, I've also been open to doing more like commentary about just politics. Well, maybe less politics and more so nowadays, like especially spirituality, because that's been a lot of stuff I've been going through. So I think about doing more vlogs and stuff about that. But yeah, definitely dog videos, autism, and there's all sorts of stuff. I do feel a need to. I should probably put myself more out there than I have been lately. I feel like I'm definitely in a better space mentally, especially after COVID and all this nonsense.
During the COVID pandemic, how did you overcome the struggles that you went through, especially when it came to looking for work? And what was the lockdowns like for you in your area? Was it that bad? Was it severe, or was it
I
not as
mean,
bad as it was in the States?
I locked myself down pretty hard. I mean, I didn't get a job until like this year. Like that previous job I had before at the grocery store produce section. I didn't do that until March, like the day after St. Patrick's Day, which I forget. Like, yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, like so it was like March by the time I had that job, and so
What
for
area
those
are
years,
where are you in the United States?
I'm in Michigan, but I'm in like Southwest Michigan. I'm in the opposite side of Detroit. Like literally, I'm actually right between View Vision where Chicago is and where Detroit is. I gotta do it. Like, yeah, you vision like where those two are. I'm like literally like kind of between those. And in a city called Kalamazoo, Michigan. Just
How do you
fairly.
feel? How do you feel
Okay.
Michigan has been doing in the last 10 years politically? Do you think it's been heading in the right direction, or do you think it's politically just going to rubbish?
Oh, Michigan's been like weird. I mean, we kind of go back and forth with our governors and like and our local politics. Well, not the counties themselves, but more so just like this how like the who's in power. It's kind of been fluctuating. So we've been almost like we're kind of like a quasi swing state, really. We're like really like a quasi swing state. So we've kind of been all over the place. Um, with this, especially with the local, I mean, we got midterms coming up, and so that's going to be really interesting to see how that ends up.
Who?
I feel like
What candidate in Michigan are you supporting?
I'm kind of just more going mostly the. I think I'm probably going to just go end up mostly. I'm just going to go Democrat, really, just because the Republican is just too maybe too like especially socially they're just too much and there's just too much socially and like even like economically because I'm a bit of a leftist in terms of that sort of stuff in general. I'm well more anarchist than anything else, but like I'm more sympathetic to the left in a lot of the regards. I think that's kind of the better route to go.
So when you say you're more open to the left in ideas, like what ways, like what policies?
Like in terms of the libertarian left, like I think of when I think of libertarianism, I think of it not from the conservative, like hierarchical traditionalist type structures, but I think of liberty and like freedom itself as being inherently antithetical to those things because freedom always strives to freedom is opposite of order in a lot of ways. I mean, you can have order and freedom for sure. I mean, you can balance the two, no problem. I mean, you can, and that's why I'm like I said, I'm kind of more of an anarchist, especially nowadays. But I mean, back when I was campaigning, I was much more, I say, capitalist friendly. I'm not as pro, say, capitalist. I'm pro market or whatever. I mean, I don't care about that stuff. I'm just not as. I don't like things that require state, if that makes sense. Anything that requires like the state to exist, I'm just not as down with because I feel the state is kind of what is part of the problem. The state doesn't help things, it makes things worse. And people think like, oh, without a state, how do you do this? How do you bring order? And it's a matter of more of a well, I think we gotta figure it out because the state is clearly I don't want to say gaslighting. It's clearly adding fuel to this fire of all the sort of chaos that's going on right now, whether you're on the left or on the right, no matter what side of the political aisle, we all know stuff's not going right. And I think we can all agree that a lot of it's because of the state. And now people want to say, like, oh, we just got to fix the state and blah, 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 and do this. And it's like, do we really need a society that's based on violence and coercion? I don't think we do, personally. But,
Mm-hmm. So, when you say that you support when you support the Democratic, party in your state's
yeah.
election, which is very unusual to hear, it's very unpopular to hear, especially with libertarians, because a lot of libertarians aren't
Oh,
particularly, fans of Democrat. Who is the person who's
no.
running for the? Hang on, who's the person who is running for the Democratic office for the Democratic side, and what makes them so good? That makes them so good compared to other Democrats when the other Democrats are in bed with the elitists and the globalists and the establishment.
Um, well, the problem is, for example, so governors, for example, we have a governor in Michigan that's running on the Republican side that's literally saying you can't even have an abortion in the case of rape, incest, or jeopardy of life. So it's like that sort of like, oof, like that's that alone. Like if you let that slide, which could easily happen because in Michigan we have a weird like abortion ban thing hasn't been that hasn't happened because we've had Democratic leadership that's been preventing it, all this sort of stuff. And they're trying to, reverse it and blah blah blah. And so they really can't until like after the midterm. So when they get elected, they can reverse that. So there's that. Um, the problem is just the Republicans, and also the problem is too is they've already clearly stated that they don't want to play by the rules. Well, as much as the Democrats are bad, at least there's like, I don't know. Maybe I'm a sucker, but like I think Trump like didn't like, I don't believe in the whole like Trump was gypped of the election and all this stuff. I believe that Biden just won. You know, I believe Biden won it, which I don't think is that surprising considering like how crazy Trump was. I think this is the thing. I'm a libertarian and anarchist, but I'm also very I shouldn't say anti-conspiratorial. I'm just not as prone to be as like big, like obviously there's global elites. You're correct in pointing out the global elites and blah blah blah. There's classism and all this stuff. Like leftists even acknowledge this stuff. We just call it like the bourgeois and blah blah blah. You call it the global elites. It's all the same people. You know what I mean? So like it's the same idea. That's it's just that it's a matter of like which ones because here's the thing.
So when you say
Especially
that
local Democrats. Oh, sorry. I was because
Logan,
especially
when you say that you don't think Donald Trump won the 2020 election, when there was a lot of evidence that was presented that the election was stolen, and you had people coming out admitting that, and you watched documentaries like 2000 and the American History of Voter Fraud, which is a very good documentary. Check it out. What proofs when a person says to you, oh, the election was stolen, what arguments do you use towards Trump supporters whenever they're saying that? And like, what evidence have you seen that you think is good enough to prove that the election wasn't stolen?
that wasn't well, I just don't. It just seems to me. Because here's the thing. I don't know. I don't think there's enough sophistication to pull that sort of thing off. Maybe I'm naive. I don't know. And I think I feel like there's just a lot of business to be made off of just saying of the election was stolen sort of grift almost. It seems like to me, it feels and seems more like a grift. Like when the more I look through this stuff, it just, I haven't seen. It doesn't seem that compelling. I don't know. It just doesn't seem compelling to me. Now, if it just to me, it just seems like just some people just trying to like hype, just try to propagandize, and because here's the thing, Democrats are good.
So I get what you're saying. You're thinking
Yeah.
that the right wing, use propaganda in a way, which, fair enough.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Not to say Democrats are good; they're not good either. I mean, obviously, what we need to do, for example, is have ranked choice voting, right? I mean, that's the big one. And the thing is, especially, and this is another reason why I do support a lot of the more local Democrats. More of them are actually open to it. Quite frankly, there a lot of them have been like, yeah, we're open to ranked choice voting. A lot of the judges in the area are a lot more. They're they're more into a sort of criminal justice system that's more about redemption rather than like just pure punishment. It's really about rehabilitation rather than just pure punishment. So that's another reason why I'm typically kind of supporting that sort of wing of things, because I do feel like there's a lot of things in particular, like for especially judges and yeah, judges are probably the big one, because of that sort of that viewpoint of a more rehabilitation sort of viewpoint of criminal justice, which libertarians, universally all agree on always, is that we don't want to just focus on punishing people. That's just, no, we don't want to just focus on throwing people in jail and limiting their freedom. We want to let people grow and have better personal responsibility. That way they are able to enact their freedom and enact their lives. Because ultimately, and I agree with this point very much so, I think this is a point that a lot of leftists do kind of mess up with, is this idea that personal responsibility isn't important, or is to be put only to be ignored, or is it a top priority? Because it is. I mean, if you're going to have any sort of society, at all, any sort of civilization, it does require personal responsibility at the end of the day. It requires a individual personal responsibility. That's just the way it is. And so if you don't have that, you can't have like freedom. And this is a point where I do agree with the right. I also allow spirituality stuff too. I think the left has definitely tried to, I think they don't. It's not to say there's not religious lefties. There's definitely religious lefties. I mean, and stuff like that. But I think there's a large section of the left that wants to just rely on the materialism and materialistic sort of viewpoint of the world, and like an atheistic viewpoint of the world that I just don't think it's very comprehensive to how people view their lives. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So when you say about the left, when you look now, a lot of people say that the right, we all know how corrupt the right can be in a way, even though the right, a lot of libertarians, a lot of anarchists will say that they would prefer Trump over Biden as president. Let's be honest, because Biden, he can't get his mouth straight. I mean, the guy's a puppet with the elitists and the establishment, just like Clinton and Bush. When I hear you,
he did withdraw from Afghanistan, though. Trump did it. Remember?
Yeah. I was just saying, Logan, when you say that, like, you support more Democrats, so when you see that, what year and what era do you think was where the Democratic Party just went downhill, where they started to lose their values? Do you think it was in the early 2010s when the political correctness rose up?
Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong.
Do you think it was in the early 2000s, or do you think it was the Clinton era, or do you think it was the Jimmy Carter era that really destroyed the Democratic Party and what it really truly is?
I think, like, for example,
because 10 years ago, the Democratic Party used to be against big pharma. You could argue that in some degree, but now, especially with what they've become.
Yeah.
What is your answer to the question?
Well, because I would say, here's the thing. I mean, with Biden, especially like with the past like election and all this stuff, was only mostly for just kind of like especially because like the Libertarian Party here in America has gone to, at least in my opinion, it's just not an effective like third party, especially anymore. Especially because we have the takeover from a caucus that I personally am very skeptical of. They're just like Republican light. They really are like they have so. When you look at their policies and compare them to like Republicans, I mean, a lot of these guys are just kind of like they kind of just want to be MAGA. They're kind of like MAGA Republican.
So you're not a fan of the new leadership in the Libertarian Party?
Oh God, no. I mean, after Nick Sarwark left, it kind of went downhill from there. To be my opinion, like Nick was good.
How come it went downhill? For example, what examples?
Well, I think they just because like I think one of the reasons why my campaign was so impressive towards people is because I told them like I can appeal to lefties, and I did. I did more so than people were expecting, and I got better results despite like I didn't do door to door and knock on doors and call people and stuff like that. I didn't do stuff like I did like social media, and I did interviews, and with that I was able to like be one of the top candidates in terms of my percentage and popular vote and all that stuff. I was like in the top like 3 or 5 or something like that of all the candidates that ran in the state of Michigan that year. And I think that was in large because I was in a blue district, and I'm like, well, I gotta appeal to lefties and liberals and stuff like this. Like, what? I'm just only going to steal from the Republican? That's silly. And so, I think that's part of the problem is there's just too much of this idea that libertarians and the libertarian Republicans, and that's it. I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think that's, for example, why Gary Johnson did as well as he did, because he understood how to appeal to like Democrats. And I'm not even like raging socialist.
What was your favorite policy from Gary Johnson that you really liked?
Well, let's see. I mean, cannabis was probably the easiest one. That's probably like an easy one. Cannabis. I'm trying to remember like all of his policies. I mean, he was a bit more moderate for my personal taste, though I do think he would have been an improvement. You know what I mean? Like he was a moderate compared to what I personally believe, but I'm not one of these like purists that's like, oh, you're not as radical or as perfect in ideology as me, so like I'm not going to vote or support you. Like, no, I'm not. I'm much more pragmatic in that way. You know what I mean? I'm much more about building coalitions and tents and stuff like that. That's why I like the British and parliamentary systems in general, for example. Just any sort of parliament system or systems where people are kind of forced into building coalitions and stuff like that. I think there's something to be said about that, because I think it just encourages more, encourages less. I think there's a certain sense it encourages less division. You know what I mean? Like if you and like someone else, say you and a buddy, you're talking, you end up in opposite parties, or not even opposite parties, different parties, but like they're parties in the same coalition. You're not going to be mad at the guy for like, oh, you support that different party. You're just kind of like happy, like, oh, we're in the same coalition. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of my mindset.
So tell me about your campaign. So it said on your profile that you were an award-winning, campaign person who ran for
Yeah.
office. And what was that like? And what was the most thing that you enjoyed about like running as a libertarian candidate? And what was the one thing that you learned bad? That one thing that you learned, but that was bad about the left and the right? And what were the corruption things that you saw and the dodginess that you saw when you were running for office?
Well, I was lucky. Well, what I think that if any sort of corruption, it was more like the candidates were. It was more of a case of I think both candidates were being so nice to me because they thought I would steal more votes from their opponents. That's if anything of what more experience. I never experienced anything overtly bad. In fact, the candidates, both sides, went out of their way to be as nice to me as possible. That was the funny part. But I think it was mostly because they saw me. Both sides kind of saw me, maybe potentially as the guy to steal votes from the other side, or just not as a threat too. They just probably saw me as a non-threat either way. But so I got lucky in that regard, in terms of like having it. But in terms of just like what I learned in general, I mean, I honestly learned. I think I learned is that I do think campaigns right now are maybe a bit over reliant on like going door to door and visiting people and stuff like that. I felt like for what I practically didn't spend I didn't really spend like any money on my campaign. Maybe I think other than like a few Facebook ads or something like that. But other than that, like I didn't really spend any money on my campaign. I didn't make signs or anything like that. And I just feel like if anything, I've kind of helped prove like, man, just do a lot of virtual stuff and do a lot of interviews. I mean, I went on NPR even interview. That was one of the interviews I did. That was pretty cool. That was probably one of my proud moments of doing like an NPR interview and just being able to sit down and that was like very professional interview. And then I even did one for a local college radio station too. And they were very much super left station, by the way, too. And I even got one of the hosts to be like, actually, I want to vote for you. So, like, I mean, that was pretty cool too. So, just doing stuff like that. And I think a lot of it's just, I learned just being personable. And the only thing I think the bad things I learned is like with the left, they were very much just too, it was very just like, I mean, we already got a guy, man, like, we're not gonna, it was very much a wall. They're like, we already have our thing and blah blah blah. And then with the right, it was a bit of that, but it was also just there's a pretentiousness they had. They felt very much like, you know, they don't like, they just want certain statuses within their candidates, that I just didn't have, because I just graduated from college. I was just this guy, just fresh out of college, graduate type person. So it was definitely, so that was probably like what I learned from the negativity of both sides. I mean, I think what it really comes down to, it's more just, it is more about like, it is a lot of it. A lot of it's just about tribalism. I mean, yes. I mean, I do think, for example, the right is just too traditionalist in general. They cling too hard to tradition, and then the left, they lose sight of the individuals. That's the biggest problem with the left. The left loses sight of the individual. A lot of times they do. They focus so much on collectives, and they also focus so much on just, a lot of times, just very random fringe stuff that can half the time kind of resolve themselves out anyways. Like, I don't know.
So speaking of that, what was your journey to libertarianism and anarchism? Because you said that you were once a Republican. What was the thing that led you to libertarianism?
Ooh, so for a while, what kind of got me away from like being like as into the Republicans initially was just like things like gay marriage, honestly, and stuff of that matter. There's certain like social, like very, I just became less socially conservative, and so that kind of pushed me. I kind of felt like pushed away by the right, and then it was 2012, and this funny Texas Congressman Ron Paul comes about in the Republican primaries, and then talking about this libertarianism thing, and I'm like, oh, there's like a whole ideology into kind of how I'm already thinking. Cool. And so then from there, just kind of was, the rest was history. I just kind of was like, oh, this all makes sense, and this is all perfect and awesome, and it just, and then from there, kind of, I mean, obviously from there, I kind of shifted over time. I kind of, in terms of like because the freedom thing always became the consistent. I'm like, okay, freedom, liberty, yes, we gotta have freedom and liberty. That is the max. That is the axiom to achieve. I mean, security is only as good as much freedom as you have. Like, if you can be super secure, but if you have no freedom, you're not really living a life. You're just surviving. Then it's like, what's the point? You're just surviving. Freedom, life, living only comes from freedom. And so from there, I kind of have shifted towards anarchism and honestly, I did like that trope about like, the difference between a libertarian and an anarchist is like 6 months. For me, it was even less than that. So that is what happened with me in that sense. The logical conclusions kept going and going and going until I'm like, oh, this whole state thing itself is a bad deal. And then, especially later on, because my major is political science, but I have 2 minors in sociology and philosophy, and at the time I found out like there's a lot of anarchist sociologists, and so I started kind of looking into a little bit of that and finding out like that's there's like the idea of anarchism isn't like as fringe as people want us to think. It's actually like kind of there's a pretty there's a lot of at least intellectually, there's a lot of merit to it. There's a lot of people that kind of defend it, so it just went from there. And yeah, it's ever since then, it's just I don't know, it's been a journey. Like, obviously, I mean, it was weird with China and stuff like that.
Yeah, when you lived in China, did you think it was as bad as what the United States and like what the Western media says it's like, or do you have a different opinion to that? Because
it's
everybody says, some people say that China is authoritarian. Look, I think it's authoritarian. I think the CPP isn't very good.
Yes.
But there are some people who say this and say that. So what is your opinion towards it?
I was definitely, I'll say like my faith in capitalism broke because of China was the straw that broke the camel's back, and it wasn't because it was like this perfect communist utopia. Quite the opposite. It was because it was just that. It was like, oh shit,
Yeah, yeah.
capitalism and authoritarianism does go together. That's not good. Like,
One misconceptions a lot of right wingers, a lot of Americans, a lot of Europeans and Western media says, yes, China does have a socialist political system, but they are very capitalist,
very
and
capitalist.
probably
Oh
more
my,
capitalist than a lot of
yes.
Western countries are today.
Oh yes, yes. I mean, I remember, for example, here's a good like just micro example. Cigarettes. So like I like smoke cigarettes and stuff like that, but especially over there, I smoked quite a ton, and especially because they're very light. And but one of the things about cigarettes is they vary so much in terms of price. In your cigarettes vary so much in terms of price, and China as compared to America. Like in America, it's very limited. Like it's only like like within a few bucks or so difference in terms of prices for cigarettes. Like it's very very limited as opposed to in China. Like you get some for like 5 kwai versus like 100 kwai. Like huge difference in price and like quality. That's the big thing too. It does make a difference. Like those really like expensive, like a really expensive cigarette, like, oh, I get it. I'm like, oh, I get it. This is smooth. This tastes good. Like, oh my god, it makes a difference. So like, it's funny. Like that's just an example. That's one, just micro example of that sort of like difference in terms of stuff.
Mm-hmm. So talking about that, when you when the thing is, so as an autistic person myself,
Yeah,
one thing I want to ask you is how did you overcome when during growing up? How did you
yeah.
overcome the challenges of being autistic, especially when it came to running as a political office person? And a lot of one thing I've noticed is it seems to be that there seems to be a lot of autistic people in the libertarian and the anarchist movement, and I think that's mostly
Yeah.
because the libertarian movement seems to be more open rather than in the left and the right. The problem is the left and the right. It's very hard to get your opinions out because a lot of the left and the right do have descriptions. Like, don't get me wrong, the right does have more freedom than the left. When you were facing those challenges, how did you overcome like sensory overloads, and like what is the one thing you wish society would stop doing to autistic people that really just pisses you off, especially in the political scene?
Well, I mean, just politically, I mean, yeah, like I think you nailed it. You nailed it like that. I mean, just I know, Emma, I know. Sorry, my dog's just wanting attention, but no, like I think yeah, like sensory overload is a big thing that I got. Honestly, overcoming it, it was just a lot of just being able to just. It's a lot of just discipline. It's like as cliche as that is. Like for me, it just feels like a lot of just it's like discipline and focus and like also knowing when to walk away from a situation and being okay with it and understanding that people, just be like, hey man, I gotta walk away from this. It's too much, and just walk away from it. Just go to another room, or if you can sensory overload, just being able to relocate yourself and breathing. Breathing is always the biggest thing. If you can control your breathing, then you can control in my opinion, at least for me, if I can control my breathing, I can at least in some way kind of control the ride of the sensory loader, especially for me, it makes me anxiety and depression were probably my bigger things. As an adult, to be honest, the big thing, one of the big things is weed. I mean, cannabis. I mean, that's a big one for me. That's especially as an adult. I couldn't handle being an adult with autism without cannabis. I don't think. I mean, it just helps just not make those things are just not as much of an issue really at all. Like it's just because I mean I can go into a whole thing about how like at least from my understanding, I remember reading some studies that suggest that one of the things about the autistic brain is that we don't have as many like because apparently the human brain actually produces like natural cannabinoids, like similar chemicals to cannabis. it produced like cannabinoids and stuff of this nature. And what's interesting with apparently with autistic brains, I don't know how true this is. This is all random studies about autistic people, which as much as I do, like half of that stuff, ends up being not true anyways, which that's science for you. That's not, this is how science works. But like from my understanding, there's like less also receptors for these chemicals in general. And so one of the things about cannabis and whatnot is that it just balances us out to like normies, like we're just like it's just kind of like putting us up to even.
So speaking of that, Logan, who is your favorite autistic, role model that you look up to in the political scene that you know of?
Politicals. I don't know of any autistic people in the political scene other than Temple Grandin, I guess. Doing her thing. I don't really look into much into like the autism community and stuff like that in terms of that sort of stuff. Just because honestly, a lot of the autism community I just disagree with because, for example, I don't think of autism as a disability. I really don't. I think of it as and not to be political. It's not a political correctness thing. I literally just think of it as it's almost like it's like the difference between like manual and like automatic in terms of like your car shifting. You know what I mean? Like you don't say one. You're not saying like, oh, one's a disability over the other. Blah blah blah. You may have a preference for one or the other, but you know what I mean? Like they're both just ways of shifting. Of the car, and like I think it's the same way in terms of it's like our brains are just wired differently. I don't think it's inherently a disability. It is only in terms because we live in a normie type society, which they can't even treat each other correctly and like help each other flourish. So what the hell's chance do we have like being these weird like square pegs? They can't even like fully deal with their own circle, round pegs, they can't even fit those in the right hole. So how, what chance do we have a lot of times? You know what I mean? So I get that sort of mentality. So I don't know, but I think of it more as just we're just different, like almost like men and women. There's like biological differences there, which I know a lot of lefties don't like saying that, but obviously because one produced babies, others don't. So like, duh, but you know what I mean. Anyways, like it's kind of like that. Like we don't say men or women are better unless you're like sexist. But like if you're not, we all acknowledge they're just different. They're not like one's not better than the other. That's my viewpoint, and so I think a lot of the depends on the people, but like I know it's a large chunk of the autistic community do not like that. They don't like that sort of mentality.
So before we finish up, Logan, is there anything else you would like to say?
Man, I would say, like for example, a large part of what's been influencing my thinking a lot, especially because I haven't been as political because I've been going a lot more towards, like I say, spiritual. I've had a lot of very intense spiritual experiences lately, and I've actually been especially been focused more towards like Hindu and like Eastern, like a lot of Eastern traditions and stuff like that. And it's been interesting doing a lot more meditations and mantras and bhajans and things of this nature, doing a lot of spiritual practices and letting to try to expand the third eye and all that sort of stuff and growing. Because it's rekindled a lot of, like, for example, one of the things I did kind of lose when I lost my conservatism was I also lost my faith. I used to be very devout Catholic, and I was, into, the whole practice and everything, and I had lost my faith, and for a long time, I was spiritual, but I wasn't religious, and then when I became a libertarian, I also became an atheist, like right at the same time. I was like libertarian, and then bam, also atheist, like right at the same time. But that arc kind of wore out after a while. I kind of went back and forth, and like I said, pretty recently now I'm very much back into almost having that, like pretty much having that sort of religious sort of arc, where I guess spiritual. I mean, I don't like to call myself religious. I don't like that, but like definitely very spiritual, and like it's been good. I think that's a very important practice that I think we all can engage in a bit more. Is trying to, even if it's not about like having a soul or not. It doesn't matter whether you're materialist or dualist or what. I think just trying to be spiritual, as in being connected with your fellow human being, with your fellow just life forms, animals, plants, and trying to feel sort of empathy, love, and connection of any sort with, like I say, your fellow humans and fellow life. It's just, I think that's what's really important right now. If we can start doing that, a lot of this political stuff will also start addressing themselves. Because ultimately, it's going to be from the bottom up, and ultimately, politics, like, yeah, even Democrats win, it's not going to be. It's the lesser of two evils, mind you. It's still evil. You know what I mean? Like, it's still bad. It's not good. I mean, arguably, hardly even worth voting at this part. Hardly, if at all. I mean, I don't blame people for not voting. I get it. Like, I don't hold it against them. It's just about, doing what you can for your fellow. It's all about love. The more love we can project into the world, the better, because then that gives people hope. That gives people optimism. And when you give people hope and optimism, that's when we can start solving problems. I mean, we're going to start solving these climate problems. We're going to start solving corruption problems. We want to start, whatever problems of war and criminal justice systems and and the fact that we're like this global community, but we like to act like all these nation states when we're just really are just one planet. We're just one planet. Like, we can't just pretend like China is somewhere else. It's here on this earth with us right now. I mean, you're on literally the other side of the planet from me right now. Like, we're still on this same rock going through space, and you have to remember that, because it can be easy, like, oh, you're just on the other side of the planet, I don't got to worry about you guys. No, the planet is very small in the context of the universe. You have to remember that.
Thank you for coming on my show, Logan. It was a pleasure having you. Where can people find you?
Like I said, Tupacum, I think it's like 17 or something on the URL if you do type in the URL. But like, I think just type Tupacum, TUPACEM. It should pop up there like that. It should be able to find me like pretty easily on YouTube. On I think on Twitter I was Logan R Fleck, and then I think same like Instagram as well. And yeah, that's pretty much that. I think I have a Facebook as well, but like, who uses Facebook? Am I right? I mean, actually, I don't know. I don't know how it. Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Logan. It's fine.
I don't know. I'm saying I don't know how it is. I don't know if like you guys over there use Facebook more, but like, yeah, it's.
Anyways, thank you for coming on my show, Logan.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I much appreciate it. Very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I just want to say to everybody, thank you for joining the Welsh Republic Podcast, episode 72. Have a nice day, everybody. Take care. God bless you.